Excellent. Thank you, John. Good morning, everybody. My name is Zach Leslie. I work in operations at Puppet Labs. I've been doing this for a few years at this company, and yeah, so it's an exciting time to be at Puppet Labs. We're changing lots of stuff. We've got lots of stuff going on. So working as an operations engineer at the company, shipping operations tools is kind of an interesting job. I was the first operations engineer hired there. And part of my initial work getting involved with, the day-to-day infrastructure and stuff was to solve backups. And so this is basically what I did 4 years ago when I started with the company. And so with that, yep, I don't want that. There we go. So why take backups? Right, so we live in a world of configuration management where you can reproduce infrastructure very quickly, right? And so there's often a conversation of like, well, why take backups at all? If I can just reproduce infrastructure, let's just do that. So number one, things burn down, right? Catch fire, whatever. Data center, single data center, goes down. Those kinds of things. Coworkers, people log in. People make mistakes. You rm-rf on the wrong directory. Oops, I upgraded this thing, entered a table in a database, application's down. You need restoration processes. Solar flares, natural disasters are a thing. You see floods in data centers, you see, tornadoes, whatever it is, right? Earthquakes are a legitimate threat to data security. Zombies, I haven't ruled this one out yet. It's entirely, open to debate. Security incidents, right? So you get attacked. How do you verify? Checksums on all of the old artifacts that you had. How do you compare them to what's in production today? Has that been modified? Can you guarantee your data security? So backups provide a way to do that. And then you, right? You are a risk to the infrastructure. Like, people make mistakes. That's just a fact of life. And so in order to protect the infrastructure from myself, right, as well as coworkers and all these things that I mentioned, we take backups. So this is the argument right here. I have config management. Why do I need backups, right? So with config management, you get to build the infrastructure that supports, your day-to-day operations. It supports your company needs. It supports the goals of the organization, right? But that doesn't say anything about the data that you populate that infrastructure with, right? And so backups are a way to, mitigate the risk of extreme failure, right? So yes, we have distributed systems. Yes, data migrates between boxes, whatever. You break a link between two data centers and now you have disparity, right? How do you pick which one is the most accurate data, right? And so, through the data integrity, we have to protect ourselves because machines fail, right? There are failures, of hardware. Anytime you have a mechanical piece of equipment that, has a motor in it, over time that will break, right? So, we have strategies for this. We have RAID arrays. We have redundant systems. We build these things to scale, right? But ultimately, those systems fail as well. So you can have complex, infrastructure, and you can have all of this stuff, right? But as we know, complex systems do break down, right? If you don't have simplicity within your architecture, things do break. There are outages. And then people fail, right? You push a bad commit, things go wrong. So, that doesn't say anything about, the actual integrity of the infrastructure. Yes, and what about the data? So, exporter resources. I assume you're all Puppet users. Anybody use exporter resources today? Yeah, cool. So you're all familiar with it. For those who aren't, fundamentally, what is it? Exporter resources are a way to use local data on a remote system. Fundamentally, that's it, right? So it was kind of a hack because there was no way to communicate between systems, right, in the Puppet ecosystem. So exported resources will allow you to take local fact data and use that fact data on another system, right? And so exported resources end up storing that information in a central database, and then that gets populated throughout the environment. So this is an example, very simple. This is straight off the documentation page about exported resources for anybody who's curious. So here we have the double @ SSH key, right? And so this is going to take the SSH key, export that resource with the title of the local host name, right? And take the key type of SSH key, DSA key. And then the collection down below is where you take all of the exported resources in the environment, the resources that have been entered into the store configs database, and you collect them and then realize them, is what it's called, or collect them. So effectively what this means is that every node in your environment, if you include profile SSH, will export the resource for an SSH key, and that gets realized. So you're distributing all the SSH keys completely dynamically and automatically using exported resources. So this is pretty powerful. It's a little old school. I mean, we have PuppetDB and stuff like that now, which we can talk about a little bit later. But yeah, all right, so Bacula. Anybody using Bacula? Okay. So Bacula is just it's an open source, very robust backup system. It's pretty cool. There's a few moving pieces with it. I'd never used it before I came to Puppet Labs. It was already kind of rolled in production, but sort of half-baked. We had some other backup utilities. So my job was to sort of dive in and figure out what this is. And because it's open source, because it's free, because it's flat file configs, makes it a really good candidate for implementing with configuration management. So there's three main pieces with Bacula, okay? So there's the director, which sort of coordinates all the efforts, right? So that talks to the storage daemons, that talks to the actual client nodes, and that sort of says what type of backups you're going to have, how often you're going to run them, what files you're going to back up, whether it's a full or incremental, differential, those kinds of things, right? And the storage daemon, this just allocates disk, that's it. So it's responsible for basically receiving authenticated backups from each of the clients. And the file daemon, or the client, is what runs on every system that you're backing up. So that's it. That's the whole ballgame. So with those moving pieces, this is what the flow looks like. Can you guys read that? It's a little small. So you have the director in the middle on the left, which basically, so this talks about how the flow is. The console where users can enter commands and sort of retrieve like the status of jobs, et cetera, because all of this ends up in a database. So it's got a nice console interface for querying, et cetera. And then all of that goes into a catalog. So this is where it sort of stores the historicals, talks about how to purge old data from the system, et cetera, those kinds of things. And primarily, I think Bacula was targeted for tape systems. So it's an older style backup tool. But has been adapted for disk systems, and they have sort of I don't want to say proprietary, but a specific file format that allows for searching and that kind of stuff, where archival systems like tar, for example, do not have. Cool. So that's that. Anybody have questions before I do a demo? Yeah.
Do you use the ZFS to store your data?
No. No, we live on no, actually we have dedicated hardware for this, and it's not ZFS. I'm sorry, the question was, do we use ZFS for the backup system? Yeah, no. No, so we have, I believe it's just a RAID array sitting on like MD80M. I don't think it's any more complicated than that. Sitting on a Linux box. Okay, so demo time. So I'm using, I don't know, anybody familiar with Vagrant? Can you guys read that text? I hope this doesn't get complicated. Text is too small? In the back? Yep. I'll just close that. How's that? Is that any better? Any better in the back? Yeah, cool. So I hope this doesn't get complicated. So there's three systems that I've got here. All right, so this is just how I'm splitting my windows. The top one is going to be the PE master. So this is all using the debug kit. If anybody caught Charlie Sharpstein's talk on the debug kit, that's what I'm using to build this demo. That's it. So let me just Vagrant up this business. So this is a PE master that I've already built. This has been, I'm not destroying that from scratch. But this is basically a pristine Puppet environment. All right. So the only thing that this has that we care about for this particular demo is PuppetDB. So that's a master, and that's PuppetDB to store the actual the store config for exported resources. All right. So once this comes online, we'll bring the Bacula director online. All right. So this box has not been created, and so what we're going to do is over the past 2 weeks or so, in preparation for PuppetConf, I basically pruned the module out of our old it's been in a private repository for the last ages, right? And so the team that's taking over the backups is looking at other systems, right? And so I wanted to take this module out of the private repository and put it in the open in case it's useful to anybody else, or at least to serve as a demonstration that these kind of things can be done. So we'll bring up the Vagrant box here. This will get created. And so, yeah, so I hope, my hope is that this becomes useful to anybody else, and I hope to get tests in the system, and we'll put it on the Forge probably in the next week or so. And that way, at least, like, modules don't die in our private repository, right? We've got several modules that we've been using in production, sort of behind closed doors. And we've got a monitoring module that we've been using for ages, and it's got some custom stuff in there that, our hope is that we clean it up and publish it. The Bacula module goes the same way. So basically what this is doing is this creates a brand new node, stands it up online, and connects it to the Puppet master, signs the cert automatically. So I don't have to worry about any of that stuff, because I don't actually find that interesting. So once this gets built, then we'll just run Puppet on it. And then Puppet will run, set up the Bacula directory, create the database, install packages, et cetera. Any questions? Cool. You guys like backups? What? Nobody likes backups, right? So to me, that's one reason to get it right, right? So I don't know if you guys saw Luke's keynote this morning, but I don't like backups either, to be perfectly honest, right? So when I set out to do this a few years ago, I didn't want to have to revisit it in 6 months. I didn't want to have to come back and say, well, did we make the right choices? Did we set it up correctly? Yes, there's the agile bits that we care about, but at the same time, I want to end conversations so we can get by, right? So for the last, like I say, 4 years, we've been running on this particular system, and we haven't had to think about it. It's just not been part of the conversation. We monitor the backups, we verify them, all of that, right? But it's not been a conversation of like, well, what backup technology do we use? How do we do that, right? And so, I kind of just set out to make this happen. And that's what I've done. All right.
Maybe this is a silly question.
Sure.
So backup basically is, what are you talking about, Puppet backup, right? Puppet configuration backup.
Well, I mean, Puppet's part of that, right? So as far as the things that I would care to back up out of Puppet is the CA, the end. I don't care about backing up anything else in terms of Puppet. We store all the, the actual manifests and configuration in modules. Those all live in revision control systems. So the only thing that we care to back up out of the Puppet ecosystem is the CA. So in a particular disaster recovery scenario or something, we could nuke the entire environment. And we had to do this for things like Heartbleed, right? So when you have to rekey your entire Puppet infrastructure, having the original CAs is often useful, especially if you don't have the tooling in place to stand that up on your own. So no, Bacula in particular is set up to back up any files on disk. So for example, if we're going to back up a Postgres database, we might have a cron job that dumps that Postgres database to disk on a periodic basis. And then we just back that up as a flat file, right? You might gzip it, you might import that, and then we don't have to worry about it. So then Bacula sets the rotation and the retention on the file itself, pulls that database off disk, and that's it. And it goes into your storage daemon. And then you can replicate offsite or whatever you have to do, to ensure data integrity and that kind of stuff. We had 2 data centers for a period of time. We would have a storage daemon a night each, and all of the nodes in one data center would get backed up on the other data center's storage. So that means throughput at midnight or whatever the jobs would kick off between data centers was relatively high, but we didn't have to care because one data center could go down. We still had backups in the other data center. I think this is slower on the Wi-Fi than I was expecting it to be. Sure. So it's an authenticated process. So every component that I mentioned earlier authenticates to the system. And so with that, it's hard to do bare metal restores, right? Because you have to have some kind of operating system, right? And you have to establish trust with that system at some point. And it's hard to do that without the operating system in place, right? Chicken before egg. Lizard, actually. We've already solved this problem. All right. What other backup systems? If you're not using Bacula, what systems are you guys using? Anybody? rsync? Yeah, that's legit. So are you using, oh no, you asked about ZFS.
I was working for a company previously and we were using rsync and Nexenta.
And Nexenta, okay. With the ZFS backend. And using snapshots then? Is that?
Nexenta was taking care of the snapshots.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask, how did you verify restores? Was there a verification process? Well, you want to make sure that you can restore the data, right? Yeah. So, like, yes, well, so let me the Bacula take. Because you've authenticated all of the components, in Bacula you can talk directly to the console and you can say, I want to restore this file. And you can restore a particular file to another client that you've already authenticated to. You can restore it to the original location. You can restore it to a temporary location, those kinds of things. Manually. Okay. Yeah. ZFS snapshots are really sweet. The copy on write stuff is awesome. I do really like that. So part of the, I've before using Bacula, and today I still use other backup systems for personal infrastructure or whatever, because I'm a nerd like that. It's hard to build a backup solution that doesn't end up looking like this, right? And every road I've walked down, many years ago I started writing a backup tool in Perl, and so it's like, well, all right, so now I want to be able to track the backups and know the status of them, right? And so you want to talk to a database, and then you want to track the state and all of this. So it's just, I ended up building something that looked like Bacula. And it's like, well, why don't I just use something? Okay, so here we are in the Bacula directory. All right. And I'm just going to run Puppet for the first time. So this might take a few minutes. And this is the first run that this box has ever done. And I have to check it into an environment because I didn't, my branch name is master. I didn't set all that up. And so there's the plugin sync. You saw the original modules go. And there's like 5 modules in play here. That's it. So not too many. This is the smallest environment that I could get an operational demo going on. And this should compile.
So the middle one is the
Yeah, so this is the director and also the storage daemon. So I combine the two. Because they're discrete components, it doesn't actually matter. The daemons just talk to each other over the network. Yeah. And then the bottom one is actually a node. So I'll demonstrate, actually backing up a node and doing a restore. And, we can leave it up for questions or whatever. Bacula is pretty nice. Like I say, there's a few moving pieces. And it's got some advantages over, like a tar or an rsync type of system. One backup method, if anybody's sort of ripped it apart, that is interesting, is the time machine backups on an Apple Mac, right? Yeah. And the way those work, which is interesting for rsync. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Because it creates the hard links. And I really like this because you have one directory that is the entire snapshot. Right, just like, similar to how ZFS does copy on write. So any changes are the only ones that are written. Everything else is hard linked into the previous directory, which is pretty nice. I don't know why this is taking so long. Maybe it's because I have 2 gig of swap. I'm sure that has nothing to do with it.
How did you bring that one down? HTOP?
Oh yeah, this is just tmux. I'm just splitting the console, so it's just htop. Yeah, it's not like a Quake or whatever that was on Linux. You guys, yeah. I used to use Linux quite a bit. Yeah. So once this runs here, you'll see a bunch of packages installed. It'll set up the database, etc. And I hope it's not too slow for installing packages over the Wi-Fi. When I was doing this in the hotel earlier this week, it seemed to go relatively quickly. So rsync, one solution. Anybody using like commercial backup software? Yeah? Who buy? Net backup, okay. Yeah, it's been ages since I used Net backup. And is that a tape or a disk storage system?
Data domain, it's disks.
Okay, okay. Any other solutions out there for backups? Who's not taking backups, I guess? Anybody not taking backups? It's okay, you don't have to, it's cool. We're all friends here, right? All right, now I'm wondering why this isn't working. I'm not sure why this isn't rolling forward. I might just be killing my laptop here. So with the net backup solution you mentioned, are you using Puppet to do any sort of configuration against that?
Currently a CF engine shop.
CF engine?
Process
Okay.
evaluating and migrating over.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, configuration in general, right? So is that a dynamic allocation? Like how, like when a new node comes online, right, and you know you need to back the system up, is that a manual process for you to?
To back it up?
Yeah.
For the most part, yeah. We have to make sure the agent's on the box. We don't have it on all boxes. Most of it's virtual, and we have other backup mechanisms going on with NetApp and Smash shops.
Okay.
So typically, it's database systems, very mission-critical systems we actually put the agent on.
Okay. Cool. That seems reasonable. All right, now that that other one finished, let's see if this actually rolls.
Bacula is not a Puppet product?
No. No, it's just, I'm an open source guy. I come from the open source world. So I like to use open source tools where I can. And Bacula is pretty robust. Like, you know, there's the KISS attitude, right? The keep it simple. Bacula tries to do a good job of that while still staying robust, right? It's got the features for enterprise. You can have, as far as I can tell, it scales like crazy. Like, if you brought new storage daemons online, you could allocate an entire box to executing that, to storing all of that disk. I'm going to kill this and start that over. I don't know why that isn't. Yeah, I was hoping not to have to do any of that. There we go. Failures abound. Looks like I'm gonna have to run this a couple times. Yeah, probably. There we go. It is network. I'm just going to kill the director real quick, and we're going to start this over. Anybody using Vagrant? Yeah. It's been a couple years since I actually put this to work. All right, let's SSH. Say again? It is a VirtualBox, yeah. All right, so it won't be in the foreground. Just want it to work in one run. I hate having to run Puppet more than once. Yeah, it's going to do the same thing again. Why? That's looking better. All right, so here we're dropping configuration files in place. The director here we've got, you can see Bacula FD being the service. That's the file daemon. SD you'll see pop up is the storage daemon. -dir in places is the director, obviously. The director itself is, man, that light is terrible, is running all three. So it runs all three daemons simultaneously on the system. And I did that to try to reduce load, but as you can see, that didn't take root. And then this is probably just installing the packages necessary or setting up databases. This is all backed by Postgres. For the curious, where is it? This is where I'll be pushing the module shortly. I've got this busted branch. This is basically me for the last 2 weeks or whatever, getting ready for conf. And just making sure, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, making sure the module's in reasonable shape in case anybody wanted to use it. I don't know if there's other Bacula modules out there. I haven't looked. Some of the problems that we've had is that the ecosystem around modules sort of stood up around us. And so we've had modules in private repositories before, before the Forge was in its, the state it's in today. So we've got some things we need to migrate off. We've had a private Nginx module for ages, and I don't know if anybody's using the JFryman Nginx module, but yeah, it's a completely reasonable module. It's awesome. The community sort of really took hold of it, and those are things that it's hard to migrate, as we've seen. It's hard to migrate every Nginx web server in your entire environment to change the module. That's been a challenge for us recently, but we're almost there. All right, this should be pretty close to done. Yep. Yeah. think I need this master. All right. So what I'll do here, so we got the director on top. And let's just make sure that everything came up. This last run should be pretty swift. How am I on time? Okay. So this is the Bacula console. All right. So this is, as I mentioned, this piece talks directly to the storage daemon, authenticated, so not anybody can just connect. And it's got a pretty robust command line. You can do lots of interesting things, right? And so what I'll do here is just look at the current list of jobs, which is nil, right? So what I can do, let's just make sure. Conf job. Yep. Conf. Yep. Cool. So B console. Run one. Yes. So it's pretty easy to kick off jobs manually, and then we can look at the jobs. Right. So the job status at the end says C created. And then I expect this to completely fail. Running. Okay, it's going to fail, which is excellent. Because it's trying to back up node 1, which hasn't checked in. Okay, so what I want to show you is the exported resources bit. So we're just going to run Puppet here. So this one should be pretty quick. And I'll get this there. So standard Puppet run. This is just going to be a node. The only backup that we're actually taking here is on the Etsy directory, so we're just going to back up everything in Etsy. And it's going to connect the file daemon. It's going to export a resource about the configuration of this particular node. So it's going to talk about IP address, what password to use, et cetera, and set up the file daemon. That's it. And then which job to back up. So like if you had a web server or whatever, or an application directory that you wanted to back up, the resource to do that is one tiny resource. You say, what do you call it, and what directory to back up. And that just exports into the system, and those jobs show up on the director, which is pretty fantastic. So you can have dynamically allocated backup nodes. So as you know, the net backup solution, you have to sort of manually enter what systems you want to back up and what. This sort of helps ignore all of that while still having the same guarantees in place. All right, cool. So I'll try to hurry and type fast, but anybody have any final questions before we get going?
Did I hear you correctly, there's a web front end to this too?
I believe so. Derek, you know about that?
I think there is one.
The question is whether or not there was going to be or if there's a web front end. And we believe there is one, but we don't use it. That's right. Yeah, there's apparently some, if I recall, there's a daemon you can run on your server, like for Windows servers, for example, that sits in the taskbar, I think, and tells you about the backup status and those kinds of things. Man, packages from the internet over a conference Wi-Fi. Say that again? One more time, I'm sorry.
Does it take binary files or just?
The question being, does it take binary files? Yes.
It does, I guess so, but these are exported resources, right? So whatever you export, you will end up in PuppetDB also.
Yes.
So the database there might become pretty big.
So this is the difference. So the exported resources only export configuration data, right? So it's not actually the data. It's the what are you backing up, right? So it's not the data itself. It's telling the backup system that's where the file is. It lives on this node. These are the credentials to get into that node, et cetera, right? So that's the Puppet configuration. The thing that it's standing up and the part that Bacula fills in for you is the actual retrieval of that data, and it stores it in its own database, et cetera. Okay, so we got 5 minutes. Can we do it? All right, so the exported resource should be there. So now that it's in store configs, once Puppet runs on the Bacula director, we should see a new file pop up, or a new node specifically. Hopefully, this is the idea. And so this is basically just demonstrating that as nodes pop up, they export a configuration, the director realizes that configuration on disk, reloads the daemons necessary, and now it's got a backup schedule that's just going to automatically back up whatever you say. Yes, cool. I like this game. That did not happen. That's because it was already there. I think the, yeah, I'll just deactivate real quick. Where is it? Whoa, conf 2014 demo. Nope, Puppet debug kit. Okay, so that should be enough to remove the configuration. So you don't want to be backing up systems that don't exist anymore. So whatever part of deprovisioning process you have, if it purges the data from exported resources by talking to PuppetDB, then that should mean that you're no longer backing up that system. You can kind of forget that it exists. And the storage daemon should keep that retention. Okay, so I deactivated, and you can see, I'll scroll up in the correct window, the job and probably client. So there's the file set. So this is what the Bacula config looks like, right? And so that gets removed as the node disappears. And there's the node information, okay? And so if we kick Puppet against the master environment one more time, now it's going to export the resource again. It's going to show up in PuppetDB. That should be enough to get it going. And then we'll run Puppet one more time on the director. It should allocate again, and then we'll actually execute the backup. How am I on time? 2 minutes. There we go. All right, so now it all popped up. Excellent. We like this game. I don't need that anymore. And then we'll go back to bconsole. List jobs. E for error on the job status right-hand column. So we'll run. We'll say run the etc. backup. We will just take whatever it wants, list the jobs again. And now we have C for the second job that's created, being created in the system. And T is for complete. And so you see that, job files, there's a number of files in my Etsy directory. There's the size. If we run that same job again with an incremental, yes, list jobs, T again, and you can see nothing has changed. Now, if we jump over here to the system and we say echo foo into Etsy blag, right? And then we run the job, run job. One, yes, list jobs. That should be just enough for, so what is that, 12 bytes. So apparently, foo is 12 bytes. Anyway, that's what I've got. That's the demonstration. I'll be around the conference for the rest of the afternoon if anybody has questions. Other than that, thank you for your time.